Imagine a land where the glitter of diamonds once promised wealth and beauty. Now, picture the same sparkling stones as harbingers of bloodshed, igniting conflicts that rip families apart and shatter entire communities. In the heart of Africa, a continent rich in history and culture, greed transformed natural wonders into weapons of war. This is a story not just of stones, but of shattered lives, desperate choices, and the overwhelming cost of unchecked ambition. As you step into the Blood Diamond Wars, how greed destroyed a continent, prepare to witness a journey through hope, despair, and ultimately, the struggle for redemption. A story that asks, how much is a life worth when a single diamond can command a fortune? Let's start the journey properly, how greediness destroyed a continent. In the vast sunlit lands of Africa, long before the world knew of blood diamonds, there existed a simple, enduring relationship between people and the earth. Here, diamonds were not merely shiny stones, they were treasured gifts from nature. For centuries, local tribes and communities revered these brilliant crystals. They were symbols of beauty, used in jewelry to celebrate life's most important milestones and often imbued with spiritual significance. In remote villages nestled between dense forests and sweeping savannas, elders told stories of the earth's bounty. They spoke of times when a diamond found in a riverbed or a hidden mine was considered a blessing from the gods, a sign of prosperity and a promise of a bountiful future. Children would gather around their parents and listen, eyes wide with wonder, as the story of the stone that shone like a fragment of the heavens unfolded. However, the winds of change were beginning to stir. As word of these natural treasures spread beyond the borders of Africa, outsiders began to take notice. Explorers and traders from distant lands arrived with curiosity in their eyes and ambition in their hearts. They marveled at the size and purity of the stones, but beneath their wonder lay a darker intent, the promise of immense wealth. With the arrival of these newcomers came a shift in perspective. Diamonds, once viewed through a lens of cultural reverence, began to be seen solely as commodities, objects of trade and profit. The natural beauty of the stone was overshadowed by the glittering lure of gold. The initial peace that had reigned in these communities was slowly replaced by an insidious desire for more. As external forces began to stake their claims, the simple joy of discovery was transformed into the heavy burden of greed. It was in these early days that the first seeds of discord were sown. Local leaders, influenced by the new economic realities, began to see diamonds as a means to achieve power and influence. With the help of the colonizers, they started to control access to these precious resources, often at the expense of the communal good. The once shared bounty of the land was now a prize fought over by those with the means to wield political and military power. This transformation marked the beginning of a tragic cycle, a cycle that would escalate over time and ultimately lead to wars that scarred the continent. The simple act of mining diamonds, which had once brought communities together in celebration, was now tainted by betrayal and bloodshed. Let's talk about the spark of greed in the colonial era. As the colonial era deepened its roots into Africa, the diamond mines became a battleground of competing interests. European powers, armed with the latest technology and a hunger for raw materials, established vast mining operations across the continent. They signed treaties that favored their own economic interests, often at the expense of the indigenous populations. The treaties promised wealth and progress, but in reality, they brought exploitation. Local chieftains and leaders found themselves in a perilous position. On one hand, the promise of wealth was undeniable. On the other, there was the risk of losing everything if they opposed the foreigners. The result was a reluctant collaboration that sowed the seeds of future conflict. Communities were divided as some aligned with the new powers, hoping to secure a share of the riches, while others resisted, fighting to protect their ancestral lands and traditions. In one small village, nestled along the banks of a winding river, the story of two brothers, Kofi and Menza, became a symbol of the coming storm. Kofi, the elder, was a traditionalist, deeply rooted in the customs of his people. He believed that the diamonds were sacred gifts, meant to be honored, not exploited. Menza, on the other hand, saw the diamonds as a means to an end, a way to escape poverty and bring prosperity to his family. Their differing views sparked a rift that reflected the broader divide among the people. Kofi warned of the dangers of embracing the greed that the outsiders brought with them, while Mensah argued that this was a chance to change their fate. The tension between them was a microcosm of the larger struggle that would soon engulf the entire region. As multinational companies began to invest heavily in mining operations, the pressure on local resources grew. Traditional mining practices were abandoned in favor of large-scale industrial extraction methods. This shift not only disrupted the balance of nature but also forced many small-scale miners and their families off the land. Communities that once lived in harmony with the earth were pushed into a cycle of dependency on external forces. The transformation was rapid and brutal. What had started as a cautious partnership between indigenous people and colonial powers quickly devolved into a fierce competition for control over diamond-rich territories. The line between friend and foe blurred as greed took hold. Old alliances crumbled, and a new order emerged, one where power was measured by the ability to extract and control the flow of diamonds. With the promise of unimaginable wealth came the dark allure of power. Armed groups began to form, composed of local fighters and mercenaries, all eager to stake their claim in this new, lucrative economy. What began as a subtle shift in power soon escalated into open conflict, as these groups battled not only for diamonds, but also for control over entire regions. Let's talk how the blood begins to flow. It was not long before the tensions that had been simmering under the surface erupted into full-scale conflict. The first skirmishes broke out in remote areas where diamond mines were concentrated. What was once a peaceful extraction of nature's bounty turned into violent encounters, with armed men clashing over the control of rich deposits. The brothers Kofi and Mensah, now separated by their conflicting beliefs, found themselves on opposite sides of the conflict. Mensah, who had allied himself with a rising faction promising rapid wealth, was soon involved in battles that pitted him against those who, like his brother, had resisted the new order. In the dust and chaos of combat, family ties were tested as never before. The sound of gunfire became a constant reminder that every diamond extracted carried a heavy price. Villages that had once been vibrant with life and culture were now marked by fear and despair. Entire communities were displaced, forced to flee from the violence that spread like wildfire across the land. The natural beauty of Africa was stained by blood, and the promise of prosperity was now tainted by the suffering of millions. In the midst of this chaos, the role of diamonds as a currency for war became evident. Rebel groups and militias began to trade in these precious stones, using them to purchase weapons, fund operations, and secure alliances. Each diamond gleaming in the sunlight was a silent witness to the lives it had cost and the dreams it had shattered. As the conflict escalated, international markets grew increasingly interested in the source of these diamonds. Traders from across the globe were drawn by the allure of rare, high-quality stones. However, behind the facade of luxury and glamour lay a dark truth. These diamonds were known as blood diamonds, a term that captured the irony of how beauty and brutality were intertwined. The narrative of the conflict was no longer confined to the remote mining regions. News of the violence began to spread beyond the borders of Africa, reaching the corridors of power in distant capitals. Global awareness grew, yet it was a double-edged sword. While some international organizations condemned the exploitation and bloodshed, others saw an opportunity to profit from the chaos. The conflict, fueled by diamonds, had now become a global affair. In the heat of battle, personal stories of loss and survival emerged. One such story was that of Amina, a young woman from a small village who lost everything in a single night of violence. Her home was destroyed, her family torn apart, and her future uncertain. In the darkness of her despair, Amina found a spark of hope, a determination to rebuild her life and to honor the memory of those who had been lost. Her journey became a symbol of the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. The emotional toll of the conflict was immense. Mothers wept for their missing children, fathers mourned the loss of friends, and entire generations were scarred by the trauma of living in a war-torn land. The human cost of the blood diamond trade was immeasurable, and yet the cycle of violence continued unabated. Every new mine, every new shipment of diamonds was a reminder of the greed that had set this chain of events in motion. Let's talk the war machine during the conflict. As the years passed, the conflict evolved into a complex web of power struggles, betrayal, and shifting alliances. The diamond fields, once seen as a source of natural beauty, had become the epicenter of a brutal war machine. Armed groups, now well organized and heavily armed, operated with impunity in regions where government control was weak or non-existent. In this new era of warfare, the strategies became more sophisticated. Rebel leaders forged alliances with corrupt officials and international smugglers, ensuring that the flow of diamonds, and therefore the flow of money, remained uninterrupted. The battle lines were redrawn, and entire communities found themselves caught in the crossfire of a war that was driven by a single, insatiable desire for wealth. One of the most dramatic episodes in this saga occurred during a massive confrontation near a large diamond-rich region. The rebel forces, bolstered by foreign arms and supported by local militias, launched a coordinated attack on a government-controlled mining facility. The battle was fierce and unrelenting, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Amid the smoke and debris, the shattered remnants of a once thriving community became the backdrop for a conflict that was as much about ideology as it was about survival. At the heart of this chaos was the figure of General Okoro, a man whose rise to power was as meteoric as it was brutal. Born into poverty, Okoro had seen the transformative and destructive power of diamonds from a young age. He quickly realized that control over the diamond mines was synonymous with control over the people. Through a combination of tactical brilliance and ruthless determination, he had built an army of fighters who believed in his vision of a new order, one where the diamonds would fund a revolution against the old corrupt systems. General Okoro's presence on the battlefield was both inspiring and terrifying. His speeches, delivered with a fiery passion, galvanized his troops. "These stones," he would declare, "are the tools of our liberation. They are not just gems, they are the keys to our future." Yet, behind his charismatic facade lay a man driven by an unyielding hunger for power. His strategies often bordered on the inhumane, sacrificing countless lives in the pursuit of diamond wealth. Parallel to the battles, the international community began to take notice. Journalists, human rights organizations, and governments around the world reported on the mounting atrocities. Images of devastated villages, grieving families, and the remnants of once great communities filled the news. The term blood diamonds was now a stark reminder of the price paid by innocent lives. In boardrooms and international summits, discussions turned to sanctions, ethical sourcing, and the need for a global response to stop the flow of conflict diamonds. The conflict, however, proved to be a deeply entrenched cycle of violence. As one battle ended, another began, in a different part of the continent. The war machine, once set in motion by greed, now churned relentlessly, consuming everything in its path. In a cruel twist of fate, those who had once dreamed of a better life were now trapped in a nightmare of endless warfare, where every diamond mined was a drop of blood spilled. Let's talk about the price paid for the greediness. By now, the full extent of the human and environmental toll was impossible to ignore. The prolonged conflict had left deep scars on the land and its people. Vast tracts of once fertile soil were rendered barren by relentless fighting and the environmental degradation caused by uncontrolled mining. Rivers, once clear and life-giving, were tainted with the runoff of toxic chemicals. The natural world, a silent witness to the human tragedy, bore the burden of greed. In communities where hope had once flourished, despair now reigned. Families who had lived side by side for generations were divided by suspicion and loss. The old ways of life, steeped in tradition and community spirit, were eroded by the ceaseless demands of survival in a war-torn region. Stories of betrayal were everywhere. Villagers who had once trusted one another were now forced to make impossible choices, whether to support a warring faction for a chance at survival or to cling to a fading memory of peace. Among these shattered lives was the story of Musa, a father who had once been a respected elder in his village. When conflict first erupted, Musa tried to protect his family and his community, using his wisdom and influence to broker peace. But as the war dragged on, the relentless pressure and the lure of diamond wealth eroded his resolve. One fateful night, a band of mercenaries attacked his home. Musa's world was torn apart in minutes. He lost not only his house but also his faith in humanity. In the aftermath, as he wandered the ruins of what had once been a thriving village, Musa's sorrow became a symbol of the countless lives destroyed by the insatiable greed for diamonds. The international community, now fully aware of the horror unfolding in Africa, launched numerous campaigns aimed at stopping the trade in conflict diamonds. Activists gathered, petitioned governments, and demanded that the global market reject diamonds that had been tainted by bloodshed. The Kimberley process, a joint initiative between governments, industry, and civil society, was one such effort. It sought to certify the origins of diamonds and ensure that conflict stones did not enter the global market. Yet for many on the ground, these measures felt too little, too late. In courtrooms and conference halls around the world, debates raged about responsibility and accountability. Who should bear the blame for the tragedy that had unfolded? The corrupt officials who profited from the trade, the rebel leaders who sacrificed lives for wealth, or the international corporations that greedily bought the stones without a second thought? For the ordinary people, however, the questions were more personal. How many more lives would be sacrificed for another diamond? And could the cycle of violence ever truly be broken? The cost of greed had been steep. It was written in the scars on the land, in the tear-stained faces of the survivors, and in the silent memories of those who had lost everything. Each diamond was a reminder of a time when ambition overshadowed compassion, and when the lust for wealth turned a continent into a battleground. The price of greed was not measured in dollars or carats. It was measured in lives, in broken families, and in the lost potential of a people who had once known peace. Let's give account about the road to redemption. After years of relentless conflict, a quiet voice of change began to emerge. In the aftermath of the bloodshed, communities, weary and broken, started to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. It was a slow and painful process, a road to redemption paved with sacrifice and hope. Local leaders, activists, and even some former combatants began to call for reconciliation and a new way forward. They sought to reclaim their land, to restore what had been lost, and to ensure that the scars of the past would not be forgotten. Amina, the young woman who had once lost everything, became a beacon of hope for her people. With the support of international non-governmental organizations and local grassroots movements, she helped establish community centers that provided education, healthcare, and a safe space for healing. These centers were more than just physical structures. They were symbols of a renewed commitment to life and the belief that even the deepest wounds could be mended. The process of rebuilding was fraught with challenges. The remnants of the war machine, the militias, the corrupt officials, and the old networks of diamond smuggling did not vanish overnight. It took years of persistent effort, negotiations, and sometimes painful compromises to bring about lasting change. International pressure and local determination slowly began to shift the balance of power away from those who had thrived on conflict and towards those who believed in a peaceful future. One of the key turning points in this struggle was the signing of a historic peace agreement in a neutral town hall, where representatives from all sides came together to discuss the future of their land. In an emotionally charged ceremony, they acknowledged the past, expressed their remorse for the lives lost, and committed themselves to building a future based on justice, reconciliation, and sustainable development. The ceremony was broadcast on local television, and for many viewers, it was the first real sign that there might be hope beyond the endless cycle of violence. In parallel with these grassroots efforts, international bodies worked tirelessly to reform the diamond industry. New regulations, strict certifications, and a commitment to ethical sourcing slowly transformed the market. Buyers around the world were encouraged to seek out diamonds that were free of conflict, and consumer awareness campaigns emphasized that beauty should never come at the cost of human life. The Kimberley process, despite its early setbacks, was refined and expanded, with more rigorous standards that left little room for exploitation. The road to redemption was not without setbacks. There were moments when it seemed that the old forces of greed and violence might reassert themselves. Incidents of smuggling and isolated clashes still occurred, and the memories of past atrocities remained painfully vivid. But the collective will of the people, those who had suffered and those who dared to dream of a different future, proved stronger than the dark legacies of greed. In every village, in every town, the people began to rebuild. They planted new crops in fields that had been barren, reopened schools that had been shuttered by conflict, and slowly, painstakingly, began to knit their communities back together. The legacy of the Blood Diamond Wars was not easily erased, but with every act of forgiveness, every effort to educate the young, the seeds of a more compassionate society were sown. Let's talk about the ultimate legacy of lessons that can be derived from this story. As we close the pages on this long and painful chapter in Africa's history, the story of the Blood Diamond Wars stands as a stark reminder of the cost of unchecked greed. The glitter of diamonds, once seen as a symbol of beauty and prosperity, became a dark testament to the lengths that human ambition can reach when it is driven by self-interest and power. The legacy of these wars lives on in the memories of those who survived, in the songs sung by elders around fading campfires, and in the eyes of the children who now attend schools built on the ruins of conflict. Their stories are a call to all of us, a call to look beyond the superficial allure of wealth and to recognize that the true treasures in life are the bonds of community, the strength of our humanity, and the beauty of a world that values life over profit. In this new era, the struggle for redemption continues. Efforts to transform the diamond industry into one that honors human dignity and environmental sustainability are ongoing. New policies, international collaborations, and local initiatives are paving the way for a future where natural resources serve as a foundation for progress, not as a trigger for conflict. The scars of the past are slowly healing, and with every step forward there is a renewed hope that the lessons of history will not be forgotten. For every life that was lost, for every community that was torn apart, there is now a commitment to ensure that the horrors of the past are transformed into a legacy of resilience and compassion. The Blood Diamond Wars remind us that the allure of wealth must always be balanced by the responsibility to protect and cherish life. They challenge us to build a future where greed is replaced by generosity, where conflict gives way to cooperation, and where the natural beauty of our world is preserved for generations to come. And so, as the sun sets over the vast African plains, there is a quiet promise in the twilight, a promise that even in the aftermath of deep wounds, hope can rise like a new dawn. The story of the Blood Diamond Wars, with all its pain and redemption, is a testament to the strength of the human spirit, and a reminder that every shattered piece of our past can be reassembled into a mosaic of hope, unity, and lasting change. Join the legends. Subscribe now to embark on an epic journey through the untold stories of heroes, triumphs, and timeless legends. Don't miss your chance to be part of our exclusive community where every email brings you closer to the legends that inspire us all. Subscribe today and let the story of legends unfold in your inbox